Pledge of Allegiance in a coffee cup. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible, liberty and justice
for all. Okay. All right. Timing was a little bit off, but we all said it. Appropriate for Tiverton. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of 7/9.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
I second it, Sally.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Mrs. Black?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Palish?
yes.
And I vote yes. Minutes are approved. Guess we haven't met in a while. I'm kind of forgetting who's on the committee. All right. Old business, we have the bus lot. Dr. Sanquioni or Ms. Roderick, either one of you.
I have it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you may recall from our last meeting, there was a proposal on the table to use the middle school parking lot as the bus depot for the buses that service Tiverton and a few other towns. There was a proposal for a financial incentive for us to do so. It's about $40,000. There was a lot of questions from the committee. So, Amy, do we have an updated proposal or anything? Does the committee have the contract?
I forwarded the contract as it stands, as it stood at the last meeting to the members earlier today. Any revisions to that will come after this meeting.
Okay. And so we have two members of First Student in the waiting room. Dr.
Can I, before we let them in, can I just bring up a procedural issue?
Sure.
I'm not sure that the school committee is the proper body to be leasing school property. I mean, this is town property. We have the complete care and control as schools, as long as they're being used as schools. But this isn't an issue of using it as a school. This is them wanting to lease town-owned property and provide money for town-owned property, which I believe then would go into the general fund. I'm not sure that we have the authority to approve the lease of town-owned property. Certainly, I would think the council would come to us and ask if it would get in the way of us operating the schools, but I'm not sure we're the proper body.
That's a really good question. I think we would have to ask both our legal counsel and probably the town solicitor to see how they viewed that.
Right. I looked up the general law, and I mean, the law is pretty clear that we only have care and control as a school while we're using it as a school. This wouldn't be using it as a school.
We allow community organizations to do all kinds of things without necessarily being part of our mission as an educational body.
We allow them use of the building. We allow them use of the building. We don't allow anyone to pay us a fee to use them.
No, I know. That's why I think we would need some sort of an opinion from our counsel and the solicitor.
And I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting, or I would have brought this up then.
Yep. No, it's a really good point. Having said that, I think we can proceed with discussion anyway with them. So, Ms. Roderick, you said you had forwarded the last contract, which is unchanged from the contract that we had beforehand.
So, from the last meeting, there were suggestions that we potentially reach out to First Student to potentially renegotiate the remuneration they would be giving the district and so forth. At that time, we did not have a copy of the contract language. So they provided that to me today. Right. And my thought process was not to reach back out to them on that point until the committee approved to actually do it. Let's not start some larger ancillary conversations when the committee hasn't approved the measure to start with, was my thinking.
Yep. Well, I have to say that anything that was sent to me today, I have not reviewed. I've been at work all day.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure if anybody else has.
Dr.
Uh,
Watkins?
yes, Mrs. Black.
I looked at it, and I don't know, it seemed to be the same thing that we talked about last time. It didn't seem to have any changes in it, unless I missed something.
It did not. It would not.
That's what I thought. It seemed to be, you know, as I say, just we talked about the 40s and 35 of the plowing and all that stuff, yeah. And the room in the building and all of those things, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear Sally okay? Just to before we, all right. All right, so, you know, I'm gonna suggest the way we proceed is we let the representatives of the bus company come in, and Sally just dropped, shoot. All right, hang on, I gotta call Sally again.
We just make sure that inform them that there is a question as to whether it's
Yeah.
this body that would even approve the.
Yeah, I think that's the point. I'm gonna need to move to a different part of my room. Anyway, so I would agree that we cannot take any action right now unless we have some better sense of what they are, what our standing is in terms of being able to actually execute the contract. Sally? All right. You can hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Okay. If we get disconnected again, I'm gonna have to call you from a landline. So just be patient if we have to do that, and maybe we'll do that. Maybe I'll do that when we go into executive because it might be a better connection.
Okay, thank you.
So what I was just saying to Sally, to the rest of the committee, was that the way we should proceed at this point is allow the members from First Student, or the representatives from First Student to come into the meeting and explain to us their rationale. And then I think we need to be able to review the contract language because we have not had it since, you know, we've only had it since this afternoon. And then to actually also seek a legal opinion from the town solicitor and from our legal counsel about whether or not we actually have the right to execute such a contract. Is there anybody on the committee who objects to us proceeding in such a fashion? Or would like to say anything else? I'll go by roll call. Mrs. Pavo, anything else?
No.
Diane?
No.
Deb?
No.
Sally?
No, just in line with what Deb said, I was wondering who stopped Quintel Drive, but that will all be part of what we discussed at a later date. You know, because that's a whole other thing. Okay.
All right, well, you know, again, bottom line tonight is that we do not have we're not in a position to execute any contract or run on any contract. So Dave, if you want to let them in, and I'll give them the floor to say whatever they need to say. And then we'll open it to questions and go from there.
Thank you.
So
Hey, Sam, Sam, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm well, thanks. How are you? You're with the school committee and some of our administrative team. I can see Sherry's, I think she might be joining us now.
Yep.
So I think the best way to start, if you could give the school committee an overview of your proposal, and then I know they have a number of questions for you.
Okay.
Hey,
what we're
Jerry,
looking-
I'm sorry. Could we just make sure that they understand what we just
Yeah.
discussed?
Okay, yeah, so just Mr. Levy, this is Jerry Larkin, I'm the chair of the committee. So, you know, two substantive issues before you sort of address the committee. So one is, we have not had the contract language for more than a couple of hours. So none of us has really reviewed it in any detail. So we're not going to be able to certainly comment on that right now. The second is, it's not clear to any of us whether or not we actually have the authority to execute a lease of town land, even though we have care and custody of the schools and can authorize use of the buildings for certain, community activities. The buildings are the land and the buildings are actually owned by the town. So we will need to at least seek a legal opinion from the town solicitor and from our council as to whether or not we have the standing to execute any kind of a lease for the buses or anything else. So
Okay.
just to let you know that.
All right.
So having said that, I'll give you the floor.
All right. Basically, it was an easy proposal. We're looking to put the 29 buses that would service your town at the middle school. We have a landlord that we're using now that's been kind of a contentious relationship, we'll say, with him. We can stay where we are. He's just kind of been unbearable and wants to gouge our rates even higher than what he's doing, which is well above everything else that anyone else would do. So we were looking to move. I know Sherry talked to, I think, Peter about, an idea, and I think that's how the middle school came up. We looked at the middle school to see if we could park the buses there and some parking for the employees, which in that back area behind the last parking area, looks like we could fit the buses there kind of diagonal on both sides, and the car parking in the middle strip there. And I know they said there might be some parking on the other side of the building, which I didn't see at that time, like a service road or something for a few of the employees if we needed more room. We're looking to pass on the savings, we'll call it. Instead of paying a landlord, we'd look to give you $40,000 a year. We talked to Amy about this and either pay $40,000 up front or split it in 10 monthly payments over the contract, the 10 months we do for the home to school billing at $4,000 a month. And she said they wanted that option, or at least want to go that way. We need to put a light. There's a light post right at the corner or right at the little island in front of that lot. We're looking to put a light post, which we'll pay for. More LED lighting just to get more lighting to the bus, especially because we run, especially when the fall and winter come, before it's dark when we get in and it's probably dark when we get back in some cases. And we need to put a little lighting back there and we're responsible for painting the lines kind of at an angle. So the buses have a way of figuring out how to park correctly until they get used to it. So it's easy to put some lines down. And then there's also a space that we looked at, which was like a storage room right on, I think, door number 5. There's a storage room there that would fit the location manager, Sherry, and her dispatcher. I think the school said that they would put like a little buzzer so only the staff in that room would hear it, and they would let the drivers and monitors in as needed to drop off keys and then go back out. They're not going to wander around the building. They're all Corey checked because I heard that somebody was concerned with them being in the building. They are with the children all day long on the buses. So I mean, we certainly do background checks on our drivers and monitors. We're required to, and we would do that anyway. That's pretty much what we're looking to do. If we can do that, great. If not, then we'll probably stay where we are. So that's what the proposal is.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up to questions from the committee. Mrs. Palish?
My only question is, and it doesn't even pertain to the middle school, Sam, did you approach the town for other areas? I'm thinking of that area behind Picasset.
I'm not, Sherry, if you want to answer that,
Or
I'm
Sherry?
not sure. Yeah.
You know which area I'm talking about behind the softball fields?
The old tennis court.
Yeah, you know where I'm talking about behind it.
Right down back.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you approached the town for any other areas in town.
It looks like Sherry's trying to connect, but I don't know if she's
Okay.
That looks like to me too.
Especially where that's already in North Tiverton, where the majority of students just logistically are. I just wasn't sure if that was even a thought.
She's texting.
She said she did not check behind Picasset. I can see.
Yeah, I guess she's having connection issues. So
All right.
Otherwise, no. I mean, I did read through it, and I don't have any specific questions other than the one I brought up about our authority to do it, and then just that, if they had looked at other locations in town.
We had not. I think it was kind of a short-term thing where the landlord was really just being a little ridiculous in our mind. We've been putting up with him for quite a while from what I've been told. So this is something that I know Cher reached out and looked like, and we researched it quickly because we want to try to do something obviously before school, take a little
Yeah.
time for moving everything. So,
Okay, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
All right. Mrs. Pavo?
I have no questions.
Okay. Mrs. Farnworth?
I know when we first discussed this, I guess it was just last week, I don't think that there was a lot of appetite on the part of several committee members to go through with this, mainly because of the number of buses and the traffic issues that all of this would contain. And I'm not going to repeat all of that. The other issue that I myself have an issue with is, the 40,000 a year. It doesn't seem nearly to be enough for the amount of inconvenience the schools would be taking on. And then to Mrs. Palash's point, I had a different suggestion as to an alternate and perhaps better place. And again, it would involve them talking with the town, the industrial park. Lots of open land over there. Perhaps they could work out a lease with the town somewhere up there. I'm not in favor of doing this at the middle school.
All right.
And I don't know if even that's within our authority at this point.
Okay.
Understood.
All right. Thank you. Mrs. Black?
Yes, I said all the things, also what Diane said last time about all the activities that go on there and the buses being there, and plus the bus monitor, bus drivers, all of the cars. And there are other areas too that people call suggesting, so maybe Dr. Sanchioni can look into that. People call them different suggestions as to who might be able to house them. And so that would be a good thing to do. And as Deb said, we have to check with the town first, look at that whole thing.
Okay. All right. So I guess I concur with Mrs. Black and Mrs. Farnworth about concerns about the disruption to the schools, even though it's really just parking some vehicles and having some people there. I still think that that's gonna pose a significant issue, particularly when we do have after school events like parent-teacher conferences or basketball games and things like that. The buses will be in those parking lots, and those parking lots are quite full on those nights. So I think people will not be too happy if they can't find a parking space, not just because there are so many people at the school, but because they can't, but because there's also a lot of buses there as well. Now, certainly I think we could, if we eventually got to a point where we were having this having this arrangement, we could probably pick nights where the buses went to other parking lots of the schools. Ranger and the high school are both quite close, but that would be a logistical issue that would need to be sort of solved and probably encompassed in the contract. And then I agree with Mrs. Farnworth as well that the money paid back to the school, or sort of the credit we get, did not seem like a significant savings compared to the actual inconvenience to the schools. So anyway, I think at this point we have to see if we even have the authority to execute such a contract. I would also wonder about town farms, at least during the day, not overnight or not later in the day, but there are probably other places that you could use as well.
Sam and Sherry, I would definitely get in contact with Christopher Cotta, our town administrator, and as far as non-school and it may even be school, but certainly get in touch with him and, talk to them about other areas in town that they might suggest. I think it's to our benefit certainly to have, buses close by, and we want to help you. And, it's a big part of, the school day. So while we're researching legally, if we even need to, if we even have the authority, I would definitely touch base with Chris Cotta as well, town administrator, and see if they have some thoughts for other locations.
We have a real estate agent that's been working for a couple of years looking area, and it really wasn't anything there, but I'll get that through Sherry, get that gentleman's name, and see if our real estate agent or we do looks for all the properties in different towns we get involved with to see if there's anything. Maybe he's already spoken, but we'll find out.
Dr. Lockett?
Yes, Mrs. Black.
My other concern was, if I read it correctly, Mrs. Lockett can tell me, it says it's the same length of the contract. That was 5 years, and we were already upset about that being 5 years. And if this is for 5 years, we could make a really bad decision and not be able to get out of it. And that's a long time. That's even going to another committee, not just the next one, the one after that. You know what I mean? So that's if I read that correctly, this contract would be for 5 years.
Right.
Is that correct?
I believe so.
That's what it said. When I read it, it said it would be for the same length as our contract. Which we
The language, I'm sorry to interrupt. The language in the addendum related to the parking of the buses, the term is supposed to be concurrent with the main transportation contract. That's what the verbiage in the document I sent today indicates.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Sam or Sherry from the committee? Any questions from the public? Is she still there?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Larkin. We
sorry.
have some comments from Jamie French stating there's too much traffic, creates approximately 100 more vehicles entering and 100 leaving. Please not at Picasset. It's at roughly about $3.88 per day per bus. And activity buses could disturb neighbors and light pollution. And then we have one comment from Ann Tobin, who just wrote Longplex. I'm going to assume that has to do with a recommended spot for storage.
Oh, that's a good idea. They may be very interested in making some money, and they do have a lot of space, and it's in the new industrial complex. So, okay, is that it? All right, thank you.
Okay. I will look forward to hearing what you guys decide to move forward or not. So,
Okay,
appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good night. Yep.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
all right. We are on.
Just before we move off on this, our policy does say school facilities will not be used for activities that bring about commercial gain or private profit.
Huh.
Who knew?
Yeah.
Policies.
Well, yeah. Well, and I guess that's yeah. That certainly opens up the question. I would guess.
No, and we'll look into it.
I
was just.
Yeah. No. I would guess that something that's embedded in the contract with the bus company would not qualify as that, but you're right. It's a good point to have brought up. So Dr. Sanquioni, can I ask you to be sure we are asking the town solicitor and Mr. Cotta and our attorneys what they think of such a contract?
Happy to do.
Okay, thank you. All right, so item number 4B is the FY21 budget update. Ms. Roderick or Peter, you want to?
Yep. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yeah, we have a couple things to share with you regarding next year's budget. And Amy, do you want to start by going through the figures, the scenarios?
Sure.
We'll do that and we'll talk about.
I'm going to share my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay. So this is, bear with me. This is a fairly succinct presentation. What I wanted to present was first our original request back in, I want to say February or so, that when we presented on those several occasions to the town budget committee. I wanted to show that we originally had requested, not only our level services budget was 35.4 million, but we had requested 4% from the town. And even with that, that left us with a $1.3 million loss, which we actually ended up cutting 1.4 million plus. Dr. Sanchioni will give you the details on that. But even with the 4% that we had requested, we were still in a very high deficit position. Then the revised request was, we went in and we actually made the budget cuts from the 35.4 to the 33.5, which is not only the cuts of 1.4 million, but there were some additional savings in health insurance and some other areas that made up the difference between the 1.4 and the 1.9. At that time, the budget committee's recommendation was 2% overall. They voted on a single number of the 32,527,800. At the time, our preliminary state aid was 322,000 and change, and the remainder would be an additional 315,000 that would come from the town to the school department. And then we would also use 400,000 in fund balance and 375 in Medicaid.
Daphne, stop.
Dr. Larkin, I have my own dog issues over here.
Yeah.
But in speaking with the finance subcommittee last week and Dr. Sanchioni, so we adjusted the budget. We revised the budget to address the deficit, but also increased it a little bit for the transportation increase. And as well, we increased our draw on our Medicaid funds. And information that we have from the town is that the budget committee was considering, level funding, which would be not only the 31,890 from last year, but the preliminary, the revised preliminary funding from the state, which decreased by about $86,000, $85,000 or $86,000. So bringing maintenance of effort to the 32.1, and then and so then we would still end up between the 33,795 up here and funding from all sources 33.1. We would still have an additional $644,000 deficit that we would need to address on top of what we have already cut. And so at that, I will leave it at that for questions.
I'm gonna start with one. So 31.89 million is maintenance of effort. So that's basically the appropriation from the town, including state aid for FY20.
Correct. Plus what the state is proposing to fund us, the 236,000. That all of that together would be considered maintenance of effort.
Right. So I'm not sure. Oh, okay. All right. So the budget committee, the budget committee hasn't made a recommendation, have they?
They have not made a revised one that I'm aware of. I know that they had made a formal one. I'm not sure if it was February or March.
It was in March. Yep.
It was in March. Okay. So they did formally vote on the 32,527,800 back then.
All right. So what you're speculating they will do is say, we will increase from maintenance of effort by the increase in state aid of 236,519. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
And
All right.
that's based on Mrs. Farnsworth's review of the budget committee
Right.
meeting. I
Okay.
believe it was last week.
Yep. But they have not made a formal recommendation, and kind of one of the, I don't know if it's vagaries is the right term, but one of the wrinkles in our budget process is that whereas we were within, our recommendation to the budget committee was still within, I'll call it the old calendar, the pre-COVID calendar. And so that stands as our recommendation of the budget committee. And at least by prior opinions of prior town solicitors, that is what we would have to put forward if we exercise the option of the school department being able to put in its own budget on the ballot. The budget committee, because they were within the period of time when the state of emergency was declared, can actually revise their number that was voted in early March of the 32.5 million. And so they would be dropping that by about $400,000. Right? Is everybody following me there? Understand? Or challenge my sort of description of the timeline? So then we would take, with the some additional savings, we would have enough in the fund balance to take 400,000 and then draw down Medicaid by 625,000 and still leave us with a 643,000 deficit from a budget, which is frankly not worth too much of anything right now, because we have no idea what the additional costs we are going to face once we know what form of learning we're going to be in. So our deficit from our projected costs pre-COVID went from 243,000 to 242,000 to 643,000. Do I have that right?
That's a reduction in funding, not necessarily an increase in costs, which has the same effect.
Well, yeah, but but my point is that this was all predicated on a budget that knew nothing of distance learning, social isolation.
Correct. Correct. The 32,527 was all pre-COVID.
Right. Buses with one kid per seat.
Correct.
So I appreciate all of these numbers. I'm not sure they're actually worthwhile, other than the statutory requirement of level funding, unless enrollment goes down dramatically.
So we're just trying very hard, I'm trying very hard to keep the potential alternatives, good or bad, out there, and just based on information that I receive on a day-to-day basis. I do have a call with other business managers in Riasbo on Thursday. Hopefully that'll shed some more light. But this is just sort of my shot in the dark based on anecdotal information at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, the blue is our minimum legal budget.
Right.
Correct.
And I guess that's, my comments, please don't misinterpret them. They were certainly not a criticism. My point is, and you said it actually best, it's a shot in the dark based on anecdotal information, which taking shots in the dark on anecdotal information, yikes. We really just don't know. And I guess that brings me to the point of, and maybe we can discuss this later, but we really just don't know yet.
So Amy, we did talk at the finance subcommittee meeting about the grant available for COVID related costs that's not in here.
That is correct, but nor are the expenses in there.
Right, but I'm just saying there is grant money out there.
Right, and there may be significant federal relief if they ever move on things that have been passed in the House and sent to the Senate and then eventually have to be signed into law, there may be significant relief, but again, we just don't know. We don't know what the state will do with its budget because they don't know what the Congress will do. So,
well, and if there's any little tiny glimmer of hope, Congress, I was reading today, both sides, the Republican side has now said they do want to try to get this done by the end of July. So.
Are they even back in session? They went out, they left. Well, I guess they must be back now.
Yeah. So there was discussion that they understand the towns, the schools, just people in general, that they need to move and that they wanted to try to get something by the end of July. But you're correct. We have no more accurate information than we did 2 months ago.
And Dr. Larkin, 2 things, if I may. First, I took no offense at your comment, so no worries there. And then also, I hate to rain on everyone's parade, but that's what you hired me to do, just a couple of things about the federal money. So I believe, I don't know how many meetings ago, when we were talking about the stimulus money, CARES money, I cautioned everyone that there is the provision in the CARES Act language allowing states to supplant their revenue shortfalls. And
right.
With our final FY20 education aid payment, that's exactly what they did. And so they shorted us, the state of Rhode Island shorted us $195,000, for which I now have to put in a formal application about how we're going to use those funds to offset the effects of COVID. So, and then in addition, the $233,000 that's coming from the second part of the CARES Act to help us offset the costs of providing sanitation and sanitizing and other preventative measures, that also needs to be applied for. It is not guaranteed, and the application for that has not even been put out yet. So I want to caution that if we have some of this federal money coming down, it has the potential that it may be supplanting things that were already voted on, and there might be some other things that don't make the money automatic. So I just want to put that out there so that we're aware of it. I'm hoping that's not the case and the feds rain money on us as a gesture of trying to help everyone out. But just because we're going to get it, they are definitely making us jump through a lot of hoops to get it.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's kind of my point as well, is that I don't think we can count on anything coming through. If it does, it'd be great, but I'm not optimistic.
I'm also, as an ancillary point, working with Captain Reimels at the fire department to put in our COVID expenses for potential COVID expenses to date for potential reimbursement through FEMA. But again, that's not guaranteed as well. We're filling out a lot of paperwork and sending it off on a wing and a prayer, hoping it comes back with some money in the envelope.
Okay. All right. Well, I think I've monopolized enough of the discussion so far. I'm going to open it up to the rest of the committee. Mrs. Pavo?
Nothing. No.
Okay. Ms. Farmer?
Just a few points that I do want to make, and Ms. Roderick's correct. The maintenance of effort exercise, calculation exercise is really a recommendation that I had made based upon watching the budget committee meetings that have taken place over the last few weeks. They've gone back into session, and we're all painfully aware of the spot that Tiverton is in because of the COVID-19 casino closure situation. And the fact that the town of Tiverton chose to fold in what was perceived to be guaranteed money into its budget last year, which resulted actually in a tax decrease for everyone in the town. Here we are a year later, we've all learned an awful lot with regard to casino money and guarantees, or what you thought was a guarantee wasn't necessarily a guarantee. I know, or I feel that everyone on this call probably is fully aware of all of that. But, you know, the bottom line is we're one of the few school districts in the state that still has an unresolved budget for fiscal 21. Many of the municipalities have processes that, you know, closed up these budget issues a couple of months ago at the latest. And it really is difficult for us to have to continue to scrape here. I mean, you know, Amy's chart makes it clear that even with all of the expense reductions, even with the first round of staff reductions that we've already spoken about on several occasions, even with drawing down our fund balance and really our Medicaid balance to what I would consider to be critical levels, we're still in a deficit situation, which can mean only one thing, and that'll mean further staff reductions. And we're not talking about not filling positions, we're talking about layoffs, let me be clear. So I think, you know, as a school committee, as a school department, we need to do as much as we can to advocate for the children of Tiverton. We're in this structural deficit position. We, as everyone else in town, never anticipated looking at continued cuts. But here we are. And I just, you know, I want to make it clear to the town that the budget committee is looking to go ahead with an FTR sometime in September. And this is, you know, really despite what was an executive order previously that mentioned the FTR would happen, I think it was 65 days after the state legislature finalized their budget. So, you know, we have to be very careful watching the dates, watching the activities, and really being prepared to talk seriously about challenging if this is the outcome. That's all I have.
Okay. Mrs. Black?
Yes, as Mrs. Fonwood said, I've also been watching the budget committee meetings, and I know the situation they're in. And she said all the things we've done and tried to do. And I'd like everyone to try to read all those other budgets that are passing and see what's happening and the increases and everything else. But that's another matter. But just bring that chart out again. I wish we were all together and see what we've been getting and not getting from the town all these years. And then we're going to see why we're where we are and who's also on the ballot. Last year, we stood in front of the voters and passed out cards not to take that money and put it in operations in that field. I think it was by 30 or 35 votes, but that's all in the past. We have to deal with it now. We have to all come together, as Mrs. Fonwood said, and try to fund all our services. And I just don't see, after we've been looking at this and looking at it, and I appreciate the finance committee and our finance director trying to go through all these numbers and make them make sense and or to make it clear to the community that they always say don't ask for what you what do they say? Don't ask for what you want, just ask for what you need, and that's where we are now. We're asking for what we need to go forward as a district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Palish?
I do think other communities have set their budgets, but I think they're going to have a rude awakening that their budgets probably aren't going to be much help. I think one of the other things that some communities have to fall back on that we don't, and like Sally said, we are where we are, is we strip our general fund every year of any extra money. You know, we stripped our fund balance of any extra money because it was just seen as this negative thing. Well, this is why we needed it. This is why you have it, is, you know, when things like this happen, we have other communities that were able to set budgets because they have, you know, fund balance, significant fund balance to fall back on. We, however, in Tiverton do not. And this is a town issue, not a school issue or municipal issue. This is a town issue. So, you know, we're going to have to all be in this together to come up with something that's going to work. And it's just frustrating to me that we don't have better information. I'm hoping as the weeks go by, because ultimately we're going to have to call back people and we're going to have to decide. And, you know, it's frustrating, and I'm hopeful, and maybe it's false hope, that we're going to start getting some information within the next few weeks to help us do that.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree. I think that regardless of whatever budget has been passed in other municipalities, or if we had passed a budget, I think we knew what we were facing in September. We would, I think, be able to at least decide what the expenses were going to be and how we were going to balance the books. However, I'm deeply pessimistic about what's going to happen in September in terms of additional costs for either distance learning or whatever hybrid we end up at. I'm pretty convinced at this point we will not be in full session, at least for all of our grades.
Well, and that's part of the frustration too, is we need, not only do we need information from Congress and our state legislator about funding, we need information from RIDE. Like, what are we going to be doing? And this is just.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Are there any questions or comments from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
Not at this time, Dr. Larkin.
Okay. Then the last thing to discuss in this regard is, I think at some point the Budget Committee would like to meet with us, and I believe it would be a good idea for us to meet with them. I think that we are still in limbo with so many unknown variables that we can't really give them anything other than an opinion. I discussed whether or not they wanted to meet with us. I sort of preliminarily said we could discuss it tonight, and then if they wanted us to come before them this Thursday, we could. After talking with Mr. Edwards, he thought that he had at least as much information as anybody has, and that there were so many uncertainties that he didn't feel a need to do that, or, you know, have us come there Thursday night. I guess the question I have for the rest of the committee is, you know, what information do you think we need to have in order to go to them and talk again and have it be a meaningful discussion? And that's a pretty open-ended question, but I think it's partly because there's no real good answer, but I'd be curious to hear what other people's thoughts were. You know, at what point do you think we can actually go talk to them about what our realistic expenses are going to be? Deb, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, we need to know what our revenues are going to be before we can even, I mean, we need to know if the state aid, we need to know, is that 236 guaranteed? We need to know, you know, it's just.
Well, Deb, I do think the 236, from everything I'm hearing, at least.
Well, again, everything we're hearing, there's no guarantees
That's all we
yet.
have. It's all we have.
Nothing's, well, so that's my point. We're going to go talk with the budget committee about things we've heard.
No,
There's no definite information.
I agree. I think the one thing that I would like to see is where the budget committee stands with their proposed overall budget. I know they're struggling to come up with that bottom line, or at least they were last week. You know, I mean, we understand we're all part of one town. And we also understand there's a 4% tax cap.
Right.
So where are they right now? And what are the big decisions that have to be made? It's almost, you know, to be part of that conversation, I think is probably more than important than anything.
Okay.
And I don't, Jerry, to your point, I don't know how we get a handle on our expenses with everything in, when is that, Peter, when is that decision going to come back as far as what their directive?
Anywhere between the end of July and the middle of August. And I think they're just tracking data as best they can to help make that decision.
I mean, so I'm really thinking mid-August is sort of the earliest we're going to be able to start nailing down, okay, now we know we're doing hybrid. We know we're doing, and hopefully by then, we'll have some information from Congress. We'll have some information from, start to get some more information from the state. But I mean, until RIDE tells us what we're going to be doing, I think it's hard to estimate. I mean, you guys, I would imagine Amy and Peter, you've sort of already started putting some numbers together about extra costs.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're banking on those extra costs to be covered by the grant.
Exactly.
But to address, if you really want to know the expenses, we can't even begin to calculate we can calculate situations of expenses, but the actual expenses won't be known until we know what educational system we're providing.
Right. So that's why I think, Jerry, mid-August is sort of the earliest. We have to know what education we need to provide before we can come up with a definite expense number. And hopefully by then, we'll also have some more hard revenue numbers.
Yeah. Elaine, any thoughts?
I think mid-August is very late for RIDE to issue its decision on their decision on what we can do or can't do. That leaves parents rushing to do whatever they need to do, whether we're partial opening, full opening, not opening. There's still that whole situation of more people are going back to work, slowly, but they're going back to work. Parents need to know, what are we doing? What are our schools doing? And it's not us as a district. It's RIDE, and it will be their decision in the end. Timeline frightens me because it's so close to our anticipated opening of August 31st.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Sally, any thoughts?
No.
Diane,
Thank you. Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I know you submitted your reopening plans to RIDE last week. And from what I've read, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're expecting feedback from RIDE regarding your plans before the end of the month, correct?
Correct. But yep.
Have they indicated when they feel they'll be kind of giving you guidance as to how to proceed for the next school year?
Yeah, I think that was the question I just tried to answer. It's end of the month to mid-August. And I believe, they want to track the disease and how it's tracking to make a good decision there. I mean, there's a lot of risk reward here, right? And I think everyone wants to be hyper vigilant about what that decision is going to be. So yeah, that's why we submitted 3 scenarios. The initial feedback was, great plan, Tiverton. You've covered all bases. Now hang in there. We'll let you know which one to use.
And you did mention that you were going to, starting at the end of July, be having weekly meetings with both parents and staff.
Starting next Tuesday.
Yeah. So I guess that's
the big announcement out tomorrow. Staff, and every Tuesday from now until the beginning of the school year, we'll have a staff meeting in the morning and a parent meeting in the evening to be able to answer questions and give information.
So as it pertains to the budget, Jerry, the answer is we probably aren't going to be able to give them anything significant until closer to mid-August.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my overall sense is that we need two things. One is, what is the state budget, predicated or not on whatever federal money is approved? And I think it's we have no idea what they'll manage to accomplish, so that we at least have a sense of state aid, and therefore can then kind of say, okay, well, this is what we would be getting from this state. What is the appropriation that is possible from the town? That's one thing. I think the second is, again, that answer from Ride about the plans as we have submitted them. And I think the thing that's going to drive that, and, again, at least in my view, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, this is supposed to be an iterative process whereby we modify it based not only on their feedback, but on what our parents and teachers and students are capable of, what we're capable of, and from an electronic point of view. And so it's not all set in stone. But the thing that's really going to drive that is community transmission. And community transmission in Rhode Island right now, we've got like 1% increases, single digit increases. But I have to tell you, most of the people in my profession are very concerned about what the numbers have looked like in the last 7 to 10 days, and whether or not they're maybe the harbinger of a rise that will be peaking sometime in late August or early September. So,
well, I think that's this discussion that's being had at the national level, that you need to give federal aid to these schools because we do not know what to expect, and we need to have money to prepare.
Exactly. And that's, I guess, why I'm sort of making the comment. My personal opinion is that full in-session learning is not likely to happen at all. And full distance learning, I think, is going to shortchange our students. So I think we're going to be in some sort of a hybrid, but that's just opinion. I don't have a crystal ball to know any better than anybody else.
So I guess I would go back to the budget committee and say, mid-August, if we have something sooner, we'll let you know.
Okay. Is there any objection to that message?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
I don't object. I just do know that perhaps they have deadlines as well in order to comply with the request that we hold an FTR prior to the end of September. So we just have to be aware of that.
Yep.
Okay.
Lots of complicated. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think it'd be a good idea if we
they're always welcome to come to our meetings as well when we're discussing the budget, any of their representatives, but and certainly I'm sure they watch, but it's just hard. It's hard for them, because they were discussing it. I watched the last meeting as well, and they're hopeful that we're going to get state aid or federal aid, because the town is in such a difficult decision. They don't want to give us less than 2, but do they have a choice? So I don't think they're in an enviable position either. But to Diane's point, if there's, if a decision has to be made, then I guess we'll have to meet sooner rather than later.
Yep. Okay. All right. And then once we have a firmer idea of what the date of that is, we can talk to them about, whether it be the full committee or it be just Dr. Sanchioni and Amy or some delegation and the two of them or something like that. I don't know if it's premature to be asking the Board of I'm assuming it's the Board of the Canvassers or maybe the town clerk and the town solicitor exactly what process. I think we had brought this up, and I don't know if we ever got an answer or if we actually sent the question about what we have to do from their point of view to exercise the provision of the charter that allows the school department to submit its own budget.
I thought Steve was going to reach out to their solicitor to discuss that. That's what I thought, that's where we left it. Whether he did or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
Check with him tomorrow.
Can you
Okay.
check? Okay, thank you, Peter. All right.
Yeah,
All right.
let's get that in writing.
Yeah, that's, I don't want it to be
No.
tangled up in some sort of, I don't know, some detail or something. All right. Any other questions or comments from the public, Mrs. Delcourt?
Just one, Dr. Larkin. Jamie French asking, what happens if the schools need to close, short or long term? How does that affect the budget or contracts?
That's a good question. So how does it affect the budget? I think you can say that a full distance learning is actually the cheapest option. It's not necessarily the best educationally. A hybrid or full session is going to entail significant additional expense. How it affects the busing contract and or contracts with Council 94 or NEA, I think will ultimately need to be resolved at a state level. But
Right, because legally we cannot deficit spend as a school.
we can't deficit spend as a school, and most of it will be, if it's, unless some miracle occurs, all of this is still going to be under an emergency declaration on the part of the governor. So she will use her executive power, I think, to enable most of these things to happen. Now, how that affects collective bargaining agreements is, a matter for attorneys ultimately, and I think again would need to be resolved at a state level, potentially through litigation. I'm not sure. So, if anybody has a better answer than that, feel free to chime in if you do. Okay, hearing none.
That's lacking, because I just asked one more thing, please.
Sure.
Could we get a new timeline from the town clerk, as Diane mentioned, about the dates where we have to have things submitted once they know, you know what I mean? That new calendar. Once they know, once they find out, like when the town meeting's going to be, and then you know how we have to count back the days when we have to submit everything.
Well, they said 65 days from when a budget is adopted at the state level, but it sounds like that's not what they're going to do. So I'm not sure who's setting the date.
No, I know.
Is it the council that's setting the date now?
From what I have been able to gather, because the council voted to extend the appropriation as well as the taxation by 1 quarter based upon the fiscal 20 budget amounts, they have decided that they will want to put an end to all of this by the end of that quarter. In other words, they have no appetite to extend it.
Well, so they don't have a date yet. Once they do, then we'll have a calendar.
Right. I think they do, if you do the math, the quarter ends September 30th. So
but they haven't actually voted on that.
No, they have
They've
not.
sort of just thrown that out there as a thought.
Yeah, exactly. At least
So
I
once
have it
they
to
vote, we'll have a calendar.
Yes.
We'll have a calendar when we have the number. Okay, thank you.
Well, I guess the question is if they voted to have an FTR next week, they would be in violation of the charter because they would not have, they have to.
Yeah, no, they're aware of that. I think that's why they're talking about it.
Whatever date they pick has to be, it's like 42 days from
right.
the budget committee puts the budget to bed.
They're aware of that.
All right. Well, I would hope so. I would think so.
Oh, they are. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask for a motion to move into executive session under Rhode Island General Law 42-46-582, litigation, legal advice, teacher litigation.
I make that motion, Sally.
I'll second it.
Okay, I'll ask for a roll call vote. Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Black?
Yes.
I vote yes, we are now in executive session. So, bye.
I'm gonna make sure.